Hi, and welcome to the Handbag Designer 101 podcast with your host, Emily Blumenthal, handbag designer expert and handbag fairy godmother, where we cover everything about handbags from making, marketing, designing, and talking to handbag designers and industry experts about what it takes to make a successful handbag. Welcome to yet another episode, a fabulous episode of Handbag Designer 101, the podcast. I'm here with one of my most favorite people from Nigeria. I mean, I do have other people in Nigeria, but I'd say I'll put you at the top, just quietly. 𝐀𝐻𝐿𝐵 of Zashadu. I'm so excited to have you. I take pride in being a personal celebrity in Nigeria, although I haven't been, but it's purely by association of knowing you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for coming on. And what time is it for you right now?
It is 3:33 something, 3:40 maybe p.m.
Right. Okay, fabulous. All right. So we have a micro time difference here.
Yeah.
So we've known each other more than 10 years. We've just established because you were a finalist in the Handbag Awards in 2014. It's 2024. It's been a minute. Like, that is a very long time, especially in this day and age, to still be doing this. There have been platforms who have tried to amplify designers from Africa. A lot of them have come and gone. A lot of them have had some issues, but yet you are still here. So let's get into that. Why are you still around doing this? Is this because this is who you are at this point? This is your brand. This is your like, is there any time where you're like, I don't know why I'm still doing this, especially where I am in Africa, especially in Nigeria? Talk to me.
Thank you, Emily. What an expansive question.
No pressure.
Why am I still doing this? I mean, it has been a journey, and there have been times on the journey where I've had to ask myself questions and ask myself, is this the right thing for me to still be doing? Am I just being obtuse and just kind of like, forging ahead and blah, blah, blah? And each time I ask myself that question, I think just having the luxury to have to ask the question and take time to answer it. Like, I have choices in life, we all do. And just being with myself in that way, I kept finding that there was still more for me to do. There was more for me to do in terms of continue adding to the design landscape, for example, on the continent, in my country. There's more for me to do in terms of like raising standards and investing in artisanry. There's more for me to do in teaching. There's more for me to do in inspiring the young people that are coming behind me. There's more for me to do in building industry. So there's more for me to do. And it's almost like of whom much is expected, much is given. I seem to have an incredible amount of strength. I have a lot of support. I'm blessed in that way. So I felt like, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that I can do this and still have a good life? Be happy, be smiley, have time for family, have time for friends. And I managed to find that. And I just keep kind of trudging along. And here we are 10 years later, and I'm still here. So that's kind of the behind the scenes of that.
So were you always a designer? Was this something you stumbled onto? Were you one of the little girls who could sew or sewed with your grandma? Like, what's the story that brought you to this point? Have you always lived in Nigeria? Like, how? Because, I've spoken to enough designers over the years, and there are there's ongoing parallels. Like, it was something someone taught them, it's been a passion, or they found something missing in the market, couldn't find it. And then it's so interesting because to start a brand, start a business, let alone in handbags, it almost seems like you are like not even risk averse. It's just organic. Like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And it sounds crazy if you explain it to anybody else, but no, I'm starting a handbag brand. Do you have experience? No, I'm just going to do it. So, and then you realize, like, looking back, like, Jesus Christ, what was that? Like, if I would have heard someone say that to me when I went through it, I would have been like, how dumb are you? Like, but and meanwhile, look at us now.
Well, the story is Okay, so I grew up in between Lagos and London. So my time now, I've spent more time in Lagos. But when I started Zashadu, I had just come fresh from London, like on a whim, completely on a whim. My entire family still lived in the UK. For the time I was in the UK for 15 years, I had only come to Lagos once. And
Wow.
so it was
Which
just
was like on a family vacation?
on a family trip, like on a family vacation. Most Nigerians come back every year, like,
Right.
keep up, so I hadn't done that. But it was a calling. I didn't know then that that's what it was, but it was just this sort of like strong pull to come and create here. So as a young girl, I was very like in my own world. I love to read. I love to just do my thing. I never knew what I wanted to be, but I just knew that I wanted to do things that made me happy. That's the one thing you couldn't, like, my logic is for, like, I don't know, emergencies or something. I cannot talk myself into doing something that I don't feel. So university, I did English and drama, what I like to do. And then I bumped into a friend. I bumped into a friend who I had spent, like, a boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend's cousin, who we'd spent a whole entire summer together. And a couple of years later, I was walking in the streets of London and I bumped into her and she said to me, "Oh, how's the fashion going?" And I was like, "What fashion? Like, what are you talking about?" Because then I think I was working, I don't remember where I was working.
You went to university in London.
I went to university in London, yeah. And then I finished and then I was working. I think I was working in an architect studio doing some admin.
Right.
And she said, what about the fashion? And I was like, "What fashion?"
Right.
She said, "I thought you studied fashion." I said, "No, I didn't." And then she said, "So all of the clothes that you always used to put together and you always used to make, it was just like something you did?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she gave me this look like, either this girl is a genius or she's a Dumbo. And I went home and I thought to myself,
you used to make your clothes yourself?
I used to just like cut things up and, pin them together and just fit whatever. I just used to or write on them, draw them, whatever. And I thought to myself, maybe I should focus on this bag thing that's been bogging me down for a while. Because by this point, I had collected maybe 200 bags, vintage bags, that I just, I mean, looking back, it's so obvious, but I just really love. And one day I realized, I'm like, oh, I know what's missing in my collection. It's my own handbag that's missing.
Wow,
and so
that's an aha.
It just, from there, I decided to go back to school. So I went to London College of Fashion. I did a long course. I did a night course. I was working in the daytime. I just wanted to make sure that I kind of knew what I was doing. And then after that, I had this calling. I went to visit Lagos. And when I got to Lagos, it was like, come back.
This was the second time.
The second time, exactly. And I was like, man, I have to come back here. So I went back home in 2009. I told my parents, I said, "Mom, Dad," my late dad, may so rest in peace, I said, "I'm going to move to Lagos." And they were like, okay.
Okay, I need to interrupt you. Are you a middle child?
No, I'm a first child.
You're the oldest?
I'm the oldest.
Of how many?
Of 3.
Wow. So you're not only immigrant offspring, you're Nigerian immigrant offspring. And that is very off-brand for a firstborn who does the right thing, colors in the lines, goes to uni, studies what they're supposed to. They probably lost it.
Yeah. I think they were really worried because I don't think, even though I had a lot of passions, and I don't think the handbag one really stood out, like it. You couldn't really tell I was passionate about whatever I was passionate about. So you couldn't really distinguish one from the other. It wasn't like, oh, okay, yeah. It was just like, oh my God, is this? And I just left in 2 weeks. I left in 2 weeks. With 2 weeks, I took a suitcase. I stayed with a friend. And my dad, before I left, my dad said to me, "Look, I don't have anything to give you. Like, I can't help you in any way, I don't know what you're going to go and do, but the only thing I can do for you, which is what my father did for me, is I can pray for you." And so he asked me to kneel down and he put his hand over my head and he prayed for me. And
Did you cry? Did you cry?
I feel like crying now, but then I didn't necessarily kind of know the significance.
Because your mind was like,
yeah. And because my dad wasn't very expressive as a man. And he just prayed and he just opened my path and blessed my path and said that everything I touched would be, all of that. And I was like, okay. And I took my suitcase and I went. So that's the story of the beginnings of Zashadu.
Were you living at home at this
I
time?
was.
Oh,
Yes,
so it's not like you had a flat to worry about. It's like you
No,
were just taking your, so it's not like the barriers were low because you had nothing to
exactly.
lose.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So you're going to Nigeria, right? Now, this is your third time going.
Yes.
And you're like, you show up at the airport. What did you do? Because
So
I
I
think
had
when
a boy.
people tell these origin stories, they neglect
Yes.
the
Yes.
details. Like you
Yes.
get there, you land, and you're like,
So
what have I
before I
just
got there,
done?
I knew I was coming. So I had a boyfriend who was Nigerian. He's also late, may his soul rest in peace. And he was in the UK with me. So I said to him, listen, I'm going to Lagos. And he was like, what? So he hooked me up with some friends. Like, okay, listen, I have this friend. You don't have any friends in Lagos. And then I had one old school friend. So I let her know I was coming. I had some family in Lagos, but they weren't like, they were family by blood.
It wasn't tier one.
Exactly. And I just didn't feel, that. So I came to Lagos. Someone picked me up from the airport. I went to a friend's house. I stayed with her for a couple of weeks. And then I met another friend. And then I stayed with her for a couple of weeks. And I just like that. I got a job quite quickly when I came. And then I was able to get accommodation with the job. And then it just kind of like everything sort of just fell into place, very, really serendipitously. Like it was the right thing for me to do. So it just kind of, the plan just unfolded and I just put another foot in and put another foot in front of each other.
Can I ask you a stupid question? Do you have two passports? Did you always grow up, or you do?
Yes.
So you showed up with like, I'm a Nigerian resident, so
Yes.
it's not like you had to deal with any issues, because that even people going back to their native country, it really doesn't matter. A lot of people, as first generation, it's not like sometimes the parents didn't go through with getting everything, So
So I was lucky that I had that.
Yeah. Wow. So that's wild. So you showed up and now you have a day job in Nigeria, which is something you're like, were you seeing this as a means to an end so you can start this handbag thing?
Yes. I mean, I didn't even at that. Yes. Okay. At that point, I definitely needed a job. I needed to be able to fend for myself. And I got a job in art. And so being around artists and seeing them believing in themselves and just continuing in not the richest people, I just felt like, man, if they can do it, I have no excuse. Like, I even, I have a day job and I can save money and I can whatever. So I just was inspired by them. I was inspired by the artist mentality, and I allowed that to inspire me.
So, Nigeria is not really a hub of handbags, right? It's not what people think. I know a lot of people have gone to Nigeria and other countries in Africa for other kinds of resources, but handbags are never at the top of that list. But we do know that obviously there are artisans, there are there's a strong native culture. Did you have to do the grassroots, let me find some women who sew, or let me see if there is a factory? Because, I know how these countries, well, I don't want to say I know everything, but I know how these countries work. Like there's always a small factory and then there's women who sew, and then you kind of have to piece them all together and go from there.
Yeah. So when I hit the ground, I knew already before I came to Lagos that Nigeria had a history in leather. I don't know if I saw something recently that's kind of making the rounds on social media about how Italian leather is actually Nigerian leather and this whole legal thing, whatever. So I already knew the history of Nigerian leather. And so I knew that there was leather. And if there is the raw material, there has to also be the artisan.
Right.
That logic. So I got there and I thought, right, I need to start asking questions. So I went to the local market where leather is sold and I started asking questions.
Right.
And I actually, this is a really amazing story because I bumped into a guy's cousin. So a guy
It's
that
always a cousin.
It's always a cousin.
It's always a cousin. Can I tell you how many street stories I have? I'm like, oh, you're the cousin. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's always a cousin.
If you ever wanted to start a handbag line and didn't know where to start, this is for you.
Living proof that independent designers can make it big.
Emily Blumenthal is one prime example.
If you had dreams of becoming a handbag designer and didn't know where to start, this is for you. If you have a handbag brand and are in need of strategy and direction, this is for you. I'm Emily Blumenthal, handbag fairy godmother and handbag designer expert, and this is Handbag Designer 101, the masterclass. Over the next 10 classes, I will break down everything you need to know how to make, market, and manufacture a handbag. Broken down for you that you'll not only skip steps in that handbag building process, but also save money in that learning curve. For the past 20 years, I've been teaching at the top fashion universities in New York City, created the Handbag Awards, and also the Handbag Designer 101 podcast. I'm going to show you like I have countless brands, from sketch to sample to shelf, whether you're just starting out and don't know where to begin, or even if you have a handbag line and just need some strategic direction, the Handbag Designer 101 Masterclass is just for you. So let's get started, and you will be the creator of the next it bag. Join me, Emily Blumenthal, with the Handbag Designer 101 Masterclass.
Guy that I had met, when I told him, oh, I design handbags, he's like, oh, my cousin does that. I was like, and he said, I'm going to introduce you. And I thought, okay, because I didn't think that would, but it turned out that he introduced me to this amazing woman, Nene, and she had a brand called Daloon. And she was so warm and welcoming to me. She took me in, like she showed me everything. She showed me the suppliers. She showed me everything. She showed me where I could buy all the best skins, blah, 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 blah. And then also she had a little artisan who was working, she had a little shop at the back of her store where an artisan was creating bags. And so she said, look, I can create your bags for you. I was like, okay. So she started the production of the initial Zashadu pieces. And it literally was like the path was just sort of laid out for me, and I just had to trust and follow. And so after that, a couple of, the first couple of bags you make, you're working with somebody. Sometimes she was infusing her own design, because my design aesthetic was very strong, very kind of austere in a way as well, not very Nigerian, not very flamboyant. And I think she thought, oh, she doesn't really know what she's doing. Let me add another bow here for her.
How did that work with your relationship with her? Because that's not easy at all.
Yeah. You know what? I was like, okay, I need to find my own artisan. This has to be under my control.
Correct.
And so that was when I started looking for artisans and scouring the whole of Lagos, like looking. And then, as God will have it, my mum had a property in Lagos, and it was a little bit far away from it's not that far at all. It's kind of near the airport, but far away from where I was living. Right. And I thought, well, if I can, maybe my mum, I can convince her to allow me to have access to that property, and then I can have my artisans there. And so I asked her, and she said yes. And I was like, yes. And so I was like, damn, okay, fine.
So you didn't think to even live in that property when you came there?
Well, it was far away from the hub
city center
where everything happened and where I sort of needed to be. So, and far away as well means, because traffic is monstrous here.
Yeah.
So terrifying. Yeah. So it didn't make any sense. But I could have that there, and that's how it led me to having my own mini factory, and we have that till this day, and it's like kitted out and bigger and everything. So
is it in your mom's space, or you moved on from that?
It's in my mom's space. It's in my mom's land. We built like more spaces on it, and and
it's wild. So I mean, and it's so interesting that you went through this there, because as you know, well, maybe you don't because you didn't have to go through it, but how expensive the sampling process is.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It is absolutely insane. And, I know at least here in New York City, there's only a handful of people left that do it. And you will get charged a minimum of $7,000 right off the bat. And that is that's with no redos, no comments. And honestly, I don't blame the sample makers, because most people who are coming in don't have the experience, don't know what they're doing, don't have orders against it. So it's the time value of money they have to put in, right? The learning curve. It's interesting that you had someone who was willing to put the time, but wanted to put their opinions and point of view and aesthetic on yours. That must have been very difficult, especially with someone who was being so generous with you. How did you handle that situation? Because, you know, it's like, don't bite the hand that feeds you, but it's like, honestly, I don't know if I need her to feed me. Like, so how did you handle that?
I think one of my gifts is that I have high emotional intelligence. So I can quickly decipher what's going on. I understood that it came from a good place. And also, in a way, I mean, this woman had opened the doors for me, you know, and that was really unexpected. And I sort of like, I just forgave it. I understood where it was coming from because I looked at her designs and I understood that she felt like, man, these girls' bags aren't going to sell because there's nothing to them. It's just like really plain. Let me help her out, you know. So I got that. And I also... yes, I have my very strong ideas, but I'm also quite a fluid person. And I also don't mind trying things out. Like, I'm like, okay, you know, I can, but I knew that it would become a power struggle. I knew that like I had outgrown the grace. It's like, Zainab, you've got a lot out of here. Now be a big girl and move on.
How did you break up with her?
Well, I don't remember what I said. I think I just stopped taking... or maybe I said to her that I wanted to get my own artisan. I think I said that. I wanted to get my own. And she was completely fine because, I mean, we're all big girls, you know?
Well, not everybody is, but yeah.
Well, maybe
Let's be honest.
But okay, she was a businesswoman and she was focused. And I guess she saw me as a client, you know? She was like, okay, I want my clients to still be happy. And maybe she thought, well, if she doesn't find somebody, she'll come back to me. So let me just, you know. So it wasn't too much of a problem. And we're still friends to this day.
That's good. So I want to ask you, because when you started out, and this is not a you thing, this is an everybody thing. When every designer starts out, the retail price of their bags is extraordinary. It's really, really, really high. And especially being in Nigeria, there's not like you can create a fluid shipping cost reduced. It's not like you're going to find someone like here in the US. There's 100 different people who contact me constantly saying, look, if you work with us, we can get you a flat rate so you can offer free shipping to your customers. So how did you work on your strategy? Because this is 100% learning curve, right? You can't know this until you deal with it yourself. Like, you can't offer free shipping, but if you do, that would be something you'd have to eat. And that's a big thing to swallow. And you can't make your bags too expensive because then, you know, even as beautiful as they are, even if they're made in Africa, even if they're made in Nigeria, it will become cost prohibitive for someone to want to invest. So because it's been 10 plus years at this point, how did you work around that? Because we have a lot of listeners who are not in the US and do a lot of local production and so forth. And this is always something they grapple with. Like, okay, the production might be less, but I'm still paying for everything and anything.
Yeah. So I guess your question is, how did I navigate the structural pricing?
How did you, sure, whatever, however you want to receive it. How did you navigate the evolution of costing and shipping to make your brand sustain itself for this amount of time? Because, you know, most designers when they start out don't pay themselves. And if they do, I'm always saying, like, maybe you shouldn't, because you got to make sure the brand will live before.
Thank you for saying that, because I mean, you hear that a lot in business. Make sure you pay yourself. And it's like, I mean, of course, but sometimes
your expenses are paid for. But, you know, you're like, no, you have to make sure everybody else gets paid.
Exactly.
But, you know, like I've met designers saying, well, I need my salary. I'm like, honey bunny, from what? With what?
Yeah.
Are you paying your people? They need to get paid before you need to get paid, or else you're not going to have anybody making your bags.
And you have a vision of where you're trying to get to. You have to like, there's some things you just have to buy. Okay. So yes, the higgledy-piggledy of shipping and costing. So this is what happened. So I had a blog, because I was working in art. and I was working in PR as well. So I had essentially three jobs. And I was like, man, I don't have time to, people are always asking me, are you that girl that makes bags and also does this art stuff? I was like, yes, I am. So I decided to have a blog so I could write everything there and then put pictures of the bags. And so I did. And I didn't, forget that a blog is worldwide, isn't it? And so in a very short time, people started contacting me from Paris, from Russia, from America, and asking, can I buy this bag? And I'm like, yes. Okay, how do I pay? You can pay into my UK account. And they were like, okay, but it's coming from Nigeria. And they were like, okay. And I thought to myself, damn, Zainab, you have to like respect this.
Streamline this.
You need to make it easier for people they're willing to pay you in Nigeria, which is already sounding the way it sounds, into your UK account. So from there, I had to start thinking about shipping internationally. And at that time, the biggest shipping company was so extortionately priced.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, you know what? I have to, if I want Nigeria to be better, I can't be part of the chorus that says it's bad. I have to be a delusional person and say it's amazing. And so I was like, I wonder what the local post service is. I wonder if it's working. And I told people, and people laughed at me like, oh my God, no one's ever going to get your bag. But I was like, I have to believe in it. So I went there, met a lady, spoke to her, and I said, blah, blah, blah. So we got talking. And then I started using the local post thingy, Nigeria, to ship items outside of the country. It was very, very well priced, like, an eighth of like any other price.
Right.
And with that, I had to befriend customs officers.
Yeah.
I had to befriend airline staff because that's how the packet travels.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the way I could then, track the item and see where it was and then call someone up and then call the client. So that's what I did for I would say almost 3 years.
It's and like, then, wait, which pilot's on that plane? Okay, let me just check. Let me check in with his cousin to make sure he's getting there.
Or it's like, oh, by the way, we're striking, so your package is going to be held up for a little while. So I'm like, okay, thank you. I can tell the customer. And I always offered the customer the option of it being shipped at a higher rate. Like you can have this shipping as well, blah, blah, blah. So they could make their choice. And then by that time, a couple of years into the game, one of the biggest shippers started having like a smaller sort of, if it's within a certain amount, then it's cheaper, like a
bulk rate.
Thank you. And so they came to us and they started working with us. But then funny enough, it's kind of come back again full circle because now there's political, or it's not even political, economic stuff happening. I mean, it's worldwide. So it's really affected the rate of the Naira. And so the prices for shipping, again, have just like tripled. And so it's now a thing where we're thinking, oh, what are we going to do? How do we navigate this? So it's an ever evolving thing to be in. But going to NIPOS and finding ways to work with them was what saved us and allowed us to offer reasonable shipping.
Do you know what you need to do? Since, I know the country's big, but you're already on the inside, is that you need to offer some sort of, that you're a brand ambassador for them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I've spoken to people about this, but, in other countries that are, look, Nigeria is a big country, but you are somebody who at this point is well known enough that it's in their best interest to use you as a vehicle of a promotion and have you say and talk about the journey and talk about why it's so good and why other brands and businesses, and try to come up with a handshake back and forth. Because this way it's in your best interest and it's in their best interest. And then this way, if there's a strike, you're going on strike with them.
We're all striking together.
We're all striking. But I'm going to make sure I know that pilot's cousin is going to take my bags because I have people who want them. Yeah, no, I think honestly, when you are, especially because you're British, a British citizen, and especially since you're, you have two places you call home. I feel like you're crazy not to, because then you become the national handbag, essentially, of the country.
Yeah.
it's interesting opportunities that present themselves that I think as business owners, and especially as a handbag designer, it's not anything we would even consider. And not for nothing, it's so important. And I tell people that to continue to network, to continue to talk to people. And even though, you know, you've been doing this for 10 years, there are new people coming up. And much like that woman, you know, you're the kind of person, as I know, that would pay it forward. Let me see what I can do. Because the more people, the more talent that comes from Nigeria, the better it is. And the more people, it raises a profile that's mutually beneficial for everybody.
Yes, exactly.
Has it ever dawned on you to move back? You know, it must be hard. You know, you said your father passed and you're all the way over there. And this is a country they left for you to have a better life. And meanwhile, you went back. That must have been tricky at some times.
Well, not really. I mean, I feel like Nigeria gives me just the right amount of, I mean, I can't even believe I'm saying this, but just the right amount of rubbish and, you know, trash to deal with to keep me sharp and engaged. I think I really do feel like this is my calling. And the calling, of course, it is to design, but it's also, I recently heard something which I've been calling myself, it's a creative industrialist. I am actually here to build industry. And that doesn't exist in this part of the what's the word? In this part of the industry, I guess, or the sector. It doesn't exist. Yeah. And it needs to. It opens up a lot. It can educate so many. It can alleviate so much poverty. It can train and teach and all of that. So I needed something that was an irritant to make me face it. And I think if I were in the UK, that I just wouldn't have that. Every problem is sort of solved in that way, you know. And I also, maybe because I'm an immigrant, I also, as maybe you've heard a number of times, I didn't know I was Black until I went to the UK, you know. It's not the same. So I didn't have that struggle, which could have been an easy struggle to sink your teeth into. So I feel like, I mean, of course, there are times when you're in Nigeria and you miss home, you miss the UK, but I went quite often and I go quite often. And I like the life that I live here. I do. Yeah. So I think maybe my parents were actually a bit proud. Like, oh, okay, she's gone back to try and, you know, she's taken her education and what she's seen and what she's been exposed to, and she's taken it back to try and get more people to see that. So I feel like they felt proud of that.
This has been so enlightening. I just think this has been really, really wonderful. How can people find, follow, purchase, share all that good stuff?
You can find us on Instagram at Zashadu. We also have a website, of course, Zashadu.com. And I have an Instagram account at 𝐀𝐚𝐳𝐻adu. So you can find me there too.
I know, because I've been writing you on every platform. Zainab, it has been an absolute delight. I want to make sure we keep up with you and have you back on just to talk about what you're doing in the country and the culture and your handbags, because you're such a pivotal person within the Nigerian handbag sector. And I think the country is very, very lucky to have you. So thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much for being part of my story and for all that you do.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate and review and follow us on every single platform at Handbag Designer. Thanks so much. See you next time.